And when it comes to supporting families, Mr. Speaker, we are going to continue to support the engagement of families in extracurricular and an active lifestyle, Mr. Speaker, through incentives like the active family benefit, Mr. Speaker, and we're going to continue to keep taxes low on behalf of the families that ultimately live in this province, and we are going to ensure that we are fixing policies that were already in practice, Mr. Speaker, in many of our school divisions, either by policy or by practice, Mr. Speaker, of involving parents in their child's education, unlike the NDP, who continually stand up and say that they are going to keep parents in the dark when it comes to their children's education.
Recognize a member from Regina Elphinstone Centre.
Mr. Speaker, we don't want to keep parents in the dark, but that government wants to keep kids in the closet, and that's what this is about. Yesterday in question period, Mr. Speaker, while speaking on the topic of the proposed pronoun policy, the Education Minister said, and I quote, "We have heard from tens of thousands of people, parents, who are supporting this policy." How many parents did he hear from exactly, Mr. Speaker?
We recognize the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I thank the member opposite for the question because, Mr. Speaker, my minister's office alone has heard from thousands of people, whether that be calls or emails or letters, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know that members on this side of the House in their constituency offices, Mr. Speaker, have heard from hundreds and thousands of people in their own constituencies, Mr. Speaker. At the end of the day, the policy that we put forward, the legislation that we're going to be introducing tomorrow, Mr. Speaker, it comes from Saskatchewan parents. This is based in supporting Saskatchewan parents, being involved in Saskatchewan families. That's what this policy is about, Mr. Speaker. I don't know why these members opposite want to keep parents in the dark.
Recognize the member from Regina Elphinstone Centre.
And again, I don't know why this government wants to keep kids in the closet. Mr. Speaker, it's a simple question for the minister. Yesterday it was tens of thousands. Today it's hundreds or thousands, or he's not sure. Let's simplify. How many parents did he hear from?
Recognize the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, from all of the thousands of parents and people in this province that I've heard from, Mr. Speaker, that members on this side of the House have heard from, Mr. Speaker, again, you know what they had in common? Nobody wanted to be less involved in their child's education. That's what this policy is about, Mr. Speaker, is ensuring that as children navigate difficult conversations, difficult decisions, Mr. Speaker, that the right for parents to be involved, the right for parents to be included, it's included in there, Mr. Speaker. That's what our legislation is all about, Mr. Speaker. That's why we're moving forward with it. Thank you.
Recognize a member from Regina Elphinstone Centre.
Still no clear answer from that minister, Mr. Speaker, but if we're being charitable, let's say 20,000 as tens of thousands. So 18 letters before they announced the policy, 7 of which were from parents. There were 49 days between the release of this policy and yesterday's question period. That new minister has been busy, Mr. Speaker. That means there must have been an average of at least 408 messages a day, every day, 7 days a week, Mr. Speaker. It strains credulity. Mr. Speaker, did the minister receive more than 400 messages a day, every day, on this policy, asking this government to strip kids of their charter rights?
Recognize the Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, the member opposite, for the question. We have been busy, Mr. Speaker. We've been busy listening to Saskatchewan parents, not just over the last 49 days, Mr. Speaker, but over the last number of months and years, Mr. Speaker. I hear from members on this side of the House regularly, Mr. Speaker. They may be meeting with constituents on another issue, Mr. Speaker, and the topic of involvement in their child's education comes up. That's what's important to parents and families across this province, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this policy and what it means has been absolutely torqued by this NDP opposition, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we're not saying that children can't make decisions around changing names or pronouns, Mr. Speaker. What we are saying, though, is before that's going to be recognized by a school division, parental consent is required. Mr. Speaker, that's including parents in education. The NDP members opposite want to keep parents in the dark.
Recognize a member from Regina Elphinstone Centre.
We don't want to keep parents in the dark. We don't understand why this government wants to keep kids in the closet, Mr. Speaker. This minister has a problem keeping his facts straight. Here's a quote from the day this minister was sworn in. Cockrell said he has heard from parents who did not know that their child was going by a different name or pronoun at school. New Health Minister Everett Hinley said he had not heard a similar story from a parent, end quote. And we know that the Premier couldn't provide a single example of this when he was asked on the radio last week. So who are we supposed to believe, Mr. Speaker? The Premier, the Minister of Health, or that new Education Minister who's really struggling right off the hop?
I recognize the Minister of Education.
Be calm.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, you know who we can believe, and you know who this government does believe, Mr. Speaker? Saskatchewan parents, Saskatchewan families who want to be more involved in their child's education. Mr. Speaker, as I said, this policy, this piece of legislation, which, by the way, we haven't even seen yet because they denied its introduction in the House yesterday, Mr. Speaker, this policy is about involving parents in children's education. That's what parents want in this families want in this province, Mr. Speaker. That's why we're moving forward with this. The members opposite want to turn that light switch off and keep parents in the dark.
Recognize the member from Regina Alpha Stone Centre.
We don't know why this government is trying to keep kids in the closet. We support parental involvement, a bill to support parental involvement. Is this bill, Mr. Speaker, going to address the 1 in 4 children living in poverty in this province? Is this bill going to address the lack of mental health support that parents so desperately want for their kids in school? Is this bill going to address the collapsing roof at the École Française in Saskatoon, Mr. Speaker? Is this bill going to address the fact that parents out there are working multiple jobs, unable to make ends meet, who don't have time to watch their kids grow up? Mr. Speaker, is that what this bill is going to address?
Yep.
Recognize the Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, what this bill does address is parents' request in this province to be involved in their child's education. As I stated yesterday, Mr. Speaker, as the Premier has stated, as the previous minister has stated, Mr. Speaker, there's numerous things that already require parental consent in our schools, Mr. Speaker. Field trips, Mr. Speaker. Administering medication, Mr. Speaker. Why would parents not be included in such important and crucial decisions as a child potentially choosing to change their name and pronoun, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, that's what this policy is about. It's about connecting parents and families and supporting Saskatchewan families. Thanks, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the member from Regina Alpha Stone Centre.
Mr. Speaker, the Education Minister says that tens of thousands of parents have asked for this bill, Mr. Speaker, but he needs to get his story straight. He's telling stories that the Premier, that the Health Minister can't corroborate. His math doesn't add up, and he's failed his first test. And this matters, Mr. Speaker, it matters. This is supposedly the justification for this government recalling the legislature to invoke the notwithstanding clause on a matter a judge says will cause irreparable harm to our youth. Those are the facts. So when will the Education Minister get his straight?
Recognize the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if we want to talk about facts, Mr. Speaker, let me bring some facts to the table around this policy, Mr. Speaker. As the Premier said earlier, and as I've indicated in media interviews, Mr. Speaker, these policies were already in place explicitly or in practice, Mr. Speaker, in numerous school divisions around the province, Mr. Speaker. So are the members saying what was already in place in numerous school divisions is not good for the rest of the province, Mr. Speaker? That doesn't make any sense at all, Mr. Speaker. What we're doing with this policy is we're taking policies that were already in place, again explicitly or in practice, Mr. Speaker, in school divisions, and making that consistent across all 27 school divisions, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think that's a pretty reasonable approach.